Hello and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise, a podcast about living with ME and chronic illness, creativity, and making meaning. Dov's back with us again. It's so good to have you. How have you been?
Hi Dan, thanks. It's so good to be here. I've been okay. I mean I've been crashy. I sort of the last time I talked to you, I was still coming out of my crash of having 4 dentist appointments in like 3
Hmm.
weeks, and then my computer broke, so I couldn't be my and then my computer was broken for like a month. Now I have my computer back and my phone. I couldn't do the episodes on the phone.
Mm.
You've been super. I mean, you've been doing so much amazing stuff, and I've just been kind of crashed out and without a computer, and then I had to go to the dentist again, and it was a nightmare just in terms of sort of being non-consensually drilled. Like I was like,
Oh
"Do
no.
not put that drill in my mouth," and they basically were like, "Move over, let us put the," they just didn't listen. They didn't listen.
Oh no.
The problem is not what they're telling me it is, and I tried to tell them like they just wouldn't listen. They said so like basically I can't chew on one side of my mouth, and that is fine with me. But eventually I'm probably gonna have to get it dealt with. So yeah, so
Mm.
then I recently had that kind of debacle of a dentist appointment that I and there's not um because I'm on Medicare and Medicaid in the US, there are very few dentists who will take my insurance.
Mm.
So I'm not sure I will have access. I'm not sure I'll be able to find another dentist locally. And clearly the one that I went to is not going to be not. Yeah, it's very frustrating to kind of try to tell a doctor what your experience is and have them like completely bulldoze you and like yeah, it was bizarre. It was so bizarre, but so kind of normal. I think, having ME, you're used to doctors just sort of talking over you and not listening and doing things that you to ask them not to do. So yeah, things have been a bit, and then I'll just kvetch for one more minute and then I'll stop. I have anemia and restless legs. So restless legs is exacerbated for a lot of people by low iron, and I have anemia, so I have to take liquid iron, and it stains my teeth, and it's kind of bothers me, but there's nothing I can do about it. And the dentist was kind of yeah, said something. He was just like not very nice about that. And
Mm.
but also yeah, it really the restless legs can really affect my sleep. So between restless legs and just general ME sleep stuff, I've just not been sleeping well. And I want to be, I think I've been trying to keep up with all the like you've been putting out so many wonderful videos, and I think I've watched all of them, and I try to watch them and take notes and really like I want to be able to comment on them, and I just finished listening. So I watched the one with you and Holly where you talk about the BBC, which we'll get into
Mm.
today. And then I finally finished watching the one. I've been watching it very slowly with Judith and is it Matthias?
Matthias.
Um,
Matthias.
Matthias?
Matthias. Matthias.
Matthias. Yeah, with
Yeah.
Judith and Matthias, and which was wonderful. It was just I highly recommend. So Dan did a whole series on grief, and I think he's got all of those posted, but maybe one or two.
There's just one that's probably be out by the time we put this episode out. So yeah, with Emily. So that hopefully that'll kind of wind up the series. But yeah, it's been a journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are great. They're not all easy, but I think it's really important for people with ME to talk about grief, which is also something we're going to touch upon today, though in a little bit of a different way.
Mm.
And then the one with Judith and Matthias is about it's about trying to make art with moderate to severe ME, and I mean I think it's I think the line between moderate and severe can be very, hard. It's all of our experiences are very different, and some people can do a little art, and some people can do a lot of art, and some people it depends on the day or the week or the month.
Mm.
But they're Judith and Matthias they put on this wonderful, really powerful art show in Vienna, and so they talk about that, and Judith talks a bit about her process of trying to make art with yeah. I don't know if she uses the word moderate or severe or
I think
any of the
she's severe. I think so.
yeah
It's very limited in terms of what she can do. So what was amazing was that they put on this amazing exhibition, but she wasn't able to actually physically go herself. So it was kind of like yeah, it was amazing to hear that, and that must have been really hard for her not to be able to go and be there,
yeah
and when she'd had kind of such a role in kind of instigating the whole thing
yeah. Well,
with a
that's
partner.
like
Yeah,
I feel like that's such a metaphor for life with ME is like you can't even go to your own fucking party. But
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Um
yeah.
but yeah, I just sorry to sort of interrupt a little, but they also they did an online, because so many people with ME obviously can't go to something like that. They did do an online gallery that I think is still up, and they're working on a book possibly related to it. So keep your ears open to what Judith and Matthias are doing. And
Yeah, I think they're working on the online one and the possibility of a book. So there are images out there, but I think they want to create like a website that's almost like you can like a virtual sort of
oh, that would be
gallery of
amazing.
the work. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. So yeah,
And
um,
there was one other. Sorry, I'm trying to get water, and my setup is such that it's. Hold on. Sorry, it's it's very hard to do this in bed. Okay, I'm just going to be a little parched for the moment. Um, so, the other thing is that at the end of the video, Matthias does a sort of performance
mm,
um, that really gets to some of the existential anguish of both having ME and also like not being able to. Would you read it as sort of being about expressing things that we can't sort of verbally express or physically
mm.
express?
Yeah, I was like, when I first saw it, and initially I thought that was the whole video, and I was going to post it, and then I changed my introduction because I sort of said we'll play that in full, and then Matthias emailed me back and said, "Oh, it's actually 3 minutes from a 7 minute segment, from a 7 minute performance." So I was like, "Wow," because it really hits you, doesn't it? Like 3 minutes of somebody just saying "fuck" in a in an exacerbated way that I felt like for me it resonated, and I guess and that's what Judith said. It might resonate differently for different people, or mean different things for different people. But for me, that's the feeling that's expressed when I'm really crashy and like I'm
Right.
trying to stand up and my legs are just like jelly, and the pain from the muscles and just the complete
Mm,
exhaustion, and you just want to go. Fuck. It was just like so. That's what hit me in terms of like it was almost like a mirror seeing myself and
mhm.
being expressed through somebody else in a sense, and it was really powerful, and it would be interesting to find out kind of what other people felt
Yeah.
from it, because it was I know people have watched it, and yeah, it's I guess for some people it might be too hard to stomach, and it was like a, you know, thinking about, well, is this, should we put this out there? You know, it's YouTube, it's swearing, it's kind of like a bit edgy, it's different, but I felt it was it was representing something that's maybe like hard to put into words about that crash experience when you're really in that state. And it made
Yeah.
me feel for people that are living with severe and very severe ME, that are almost like in that state all the time.
Right.
Like for me, I've got moderate ME and I'm mostly housebound, and anything I do outside the house has a massive impact on me,
Yeah.
and it will hit me. But like I can live and like I can tolerate my life at the minute, and it did make me think about people that are living with very severe ME, that that's kind of your lived experience of just like
Right.
and it's
Just kind
hard,
of being
isn't it?
trapped
Yeah.
in what was it? One of your videos, somebody was said they felt like a caged tiger, but this it's even
Mm,
more. It's like you're trapped in your body, and in
yeah.
pain and in existential despair, and um I would love. I wonder if we could actually make a little do like a mini episode, depending, but like I wonder if people would send in their if people did send in their responses to it. Maybe we could sort of weave some of them into a video. Either if people want to send us little clips of their reaction to it, even if it's them doing something. It's like any kind of reaction people have, and we'll see what we can kind of
Mm,
put together. That would be really cool.
mm,
Because
mm,
yeah, it is. I found it like you wrote in the description that it might be exhausting to watch or something like that, and I
mm,
did find, because I found that when he was saying fuck, like it was so visceral. It was so like you could see the muscles in his neck. Like
mm, yeah.
you realized how much work it is, and like so much of our job is sort of trying to stay calm and regulated so that we don't make our symptoms worse. I feel like having ME, trying to stay sort of emotionally regulated and calm and resting is kind of a full-time job for, I think, a lot of us, and
Mm,
the consequences of having an emotional reaction like he was kind of performing on that video would be like, if any of us did that, we would
mm,
a lot of us would probably be in a
yeah.
crash for a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
hours or days or weeks
Yeah.
or however long.
Yeah. You can't even express your frustration, because expressing the frustration, it will just compound the post-exertional malaise in a sense,
Yes.
and exacerbate things. So yeah, it's a couple, probably like 3 or 4 years ago, I kind of I went to the end of our farm track. I was waiting for the kids to get off the school bus, or for the bus to come, and I just did a massive and I recorded myself, and so I have got that on YouTube somewhere, and like whenever anybody sort of says, "Oh, I really just want to scream," I like, "Do you want to borrow mine?" And like, yeah, it's almost like a vicarious sort of like way of expressing frustration, isn't it? Like you haven't got the energy to do it yourself, so you can sort of
Yes.
yeah,
I love
bear
that
with.
vicarious. Yeah, like sometimes we have to have these vicarious experiences because we can't do it ourselves, which is um terrible.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, so I'm trying to think of, like, there's so many sort of segues from here into, but I think since we're sort of talking about existential despair, I'll just say that. So I want to kind of finish up my thought on when I was
Mm,
watching, Judith. There's this really sweet moment where Judith and Matthias are together. There's only one
mm,
clip. So Judith does the whole interview in clips because it's, she has to really pace. So she's doing this over a period of time. So like Dan asks her questions and she answers in clips on different days, short. So it's
mm,
it's sort of a beautiful weaving together of different clips of her answering Dan's questions. And then there's one clip with just Matthias, and then there's one clip where the two of them are together, which is super sweet and lovely, and just yeah. So I highly recommend watching it, but it also it made me think so much about my own frustration around not being able to do creative stuff that I want to do, which is, it's I feel like our podcast is a lot about the creative stuff we can do, but I think it's also really meaningful to talk about the creative stuff we can't do, and the kind of existential
mm,
despair that can come with that. And I mean, I think it's amazing and how like resilient and resourceful so many people with MER to find ways of creating some kind of quality of life in this experience, and I don't know whether to call myself. I suppose I'm like moderate with severe moments. I don't know. It's
Mm,
like when you're, mostly bedbound, but able to putter around and cook a bit, and I think my quality of life is, uh, all things considered, pretty manageable. But also it's very, it can be devastating and frustrating to not be able to do photography stuff, not be
mm,
able to take walks, not be able to write. But I think the hardest thing for me is often not being able to write. And, and then I think about, one of the things Dan and I want to talk about, which I'm trying to segue into, is when people don't have any, when there's no quality of life, um, or when quality of life is so low that it's like, the question of what it means to exist with this illness. Are we existing? Is
mm,
what is the point where, I think for some people there comes a point where there isn't enough quality of life, and the pain and the distress and the existential despair and, potentially just like utter physical sort of torture, gets to be too much for people.
mm.
So that's my attempt to segue. I need a little help here.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't kind of done current affairs really on the podcast or talked about current stuff, but it feels like there's just so much that's gone on in the last like month for within the ME community, um we did that kind of episode on Dragon's Den with Holly last week, which I thought was really important. And if people aren't aware of the Dragon's Den story, I think most people will be, but about somebody that went on selling acupuncture ear seeds, saying that it had aided their recovery from ME, and I think that just contrasts with what as a community we've been feeling over the last like month with um, deaths of people that have been important within the ME community, and uh, Beth Mazur died at the end of December, and she was I didn't know an awful lot about her, but I've kind of learned more about her since her death, and she was the co-founder of ME Action in the US, and that's spread all over the world. Um, so yeah, we just want to acknowledge that, and that you know our thoughts are with sort of family and friends and members of the ME community that were massively impacted by her brilliant work in terms of raising awareness of the whole millions missing thing. And she did some wonderful stuff, and I'll put the a link to the obituary for her from ME Action, and there's a link within that to her memorial service, which I watched a little bit of it this morning. So yeah, deeply moving, and I think um, and then that kind of like led on to well, didn't lead on, but we had the Dragon's Den thing, and amongst that we had the death of Lauren Hove in the Netherlands on the 27th of January, aged 28, um, of euthanasia, and that's an option for people in the Netherlands, and um, that stirs up so many feelings, doesn't it, for so many of us in terms of
Yes.
her very severe ME, and that was a choice that she made, and she documented her life up until the end. And I wasn't um, kind of aware of Lauren's story until just the days before, really, and I sort of followed it on Twitter, and she had a YouTube channel, I think, as far as I'm aware, and had been writing as well about her experiences, and it was it felt like a very like pragmatic choice for her. Like this was you know, making the choice to die um, was ultimately kind of for her a choice that was a greater choice than staying alive with Emmy. And I think when we look at a lot of tweets and things like that, contrasting the sort of almost um, the Dragon's Den situation and the person that went on there, and elements that we covered in our last podcast or the previous to one podcast with Holly about an element of like, well, again coming back to this sort of like mind sort of emphasis that you need to, that individual Giselle Boxer was talking about belief and women in particular not believing they'll get better, and it just seems so flippant in contrast to what Lauren had lived and what she'd gone through and the decision that she made, and just for many of us sort of reflecting and contemplating on Lauren's situation, and yeah, there's so many deep feelings that so many of us are feeling at the minute, and in terms of our own mortality, I suppose, and our futures, and the state of internationally, the state of how ME is treated or not treated, or disregarded, or seen as something that's not serious, or seen as something that still is like tiredness, or
right?
and we've
Or
seen like,
a failure of belief.
yeah, or victim blaming. It's your own fault for not getting better, and we've seen so much media over the last couple of weeks because of the Dragon's Den thing, and some of that media has been positive, some of it's been negative, and it feels like there's it's good that there's been more coverage of ME, but it's still, we're facing misrepresentation, and
Yeah,
the reality of it is that people are making choices to end their own lives because, in Lauren's case, through that euthanasia program, because life is too difficult to keep going, and it's devastating.
yeah,
That this is the situation that we're in, that people are having to make that decision when, due to medical neglect, negligence, lack of research, lack of treatments, that this is where we're at, it's sad. um, yeah.
yeah. There was a moment, I think, where Holly was kind of like, it's 2023 or 2024,
Mm.
and this is still happen. This is still. I think that happened. My memory isn't great,
Yeah, I
but
think she said, yeah.
I think you know one thing that sort of baffles and astonishes me is that um, there are beliefs about illness that go back thousands of years. That they're caused by um, demons, or they're caused by
Mm.
like something you did wrong and you're getting
Bad
punished
karma.
for it. All of these
Yeah.
ideas about that sort of still exists today, even if sometimes the form is a little different. And then there's this sort of like wellness culture,
Mm.
really, I mean, I think like some of it comes from a place of people wanting to believe that they can have control over their lives. And I think, I've read quite a bit about this, and it seems that, some of it stems from the fact that a lot of women, especially women, are like allopathic doctors treat women like all of their symptoms are in their head, or the whole like hysterical slash conversion therapy, like all of that shit that's
Mm.
still going on. And so there's this attempt to sort of um take back some kind of control and try to find help in a different way. And so I don't want to just shit on the whole um the whole quote um alternative medicine stuff, and all alternative medicine is not created equally.
Mm.
That said, um to kind of blame people for their own illness because they haven't done the current fad diet or fad cure, like vinegar, the whole vinegar yoga, eating meat, which by the way, I highly recommend checking out the podcast um, Maintenance Phase by Aubrey Gordon, and I forget the other person who does it with Aubrey, but, it's brilliant. They pick apart health fads, and it's really genius and entertaining and interesting. It's super interesting. But yeah, it's to then have somebody, like I think for a lot of people, Chinese medicine can be a, a definite like I've never heard of anybody having ME cured by Chinese medicine, but I know a lot of people do acupuncture and other kinds of stuff, and it might sort of alleviate some symptoms, even if, I think for me, I did acupuncture for a really long time, and I was able to do it for a bit in the early on with ME, and it gave me a few hours. A few hours after the acupuncture, I felt a little better, and then, then it was done. But like, still, those few hours were really meaningful to me to just have. And I don't. I think like I think for somebody who's not, and this is one of the things that's wild about what happened on Dragon's Den. Like this person who they allowed to go on the show and to basically like exploit, like she literally just stole Chinese medicine stuff, like bought it cheap, sold it at a lot more expensive than she bought it. She's not somebody who studied to become an
Mm,
acupuncturist. And so there's no way, like if she was an actual acupuncturist, she'd probably have her, I imagine she'd have her license taken away, or there would be um some kind of repercussions for that kind of
mm,
um absolute like unethical, cruel, what she was doing. And
mm,
but she's not an acupuncturist, and so she basically just, what's the word? I'm trying to think of that word. Not exploited, but she appropriated. She appropriated
mm,
something that is used in Chinese medicine that I imagine no acupuncturist would ever claim would cure ME. Um, it certainly would be an unethical thing to do as a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and so like um, there are so many levels and layers of fuckery, and it's like people with ME already have to deal with that stuff on a daily basis. And then one of the things Dan and Holly were talking about was like after Dragon's Den, people were writing to their friends with ME and saying, "Did you see this?"
mm,
And imagining, it's like the way it affected public discourse might be helpful, but in the short term, a lot of people are having this thing thrown at them, which is like, here's an easy fix for your uncurable illness. And we get enough of that. We get enough of that. And,
mm,
dealing with this illness is hard enough and devastating enough um and brutal enough. And then to have it made light of in such a public, absolutely unnecessary way. And sorry, I didn't mean to. I I'll just stop because there was somewhere I was going and I forget. I'll hand it back to you, Dan.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I would just say there was a statement by an acupuncture body or a organization. I'm sorry, I should have made note of the organization, but they were certainly saying that that they don't make any claims that it can cure conditions or aid recovery from conditions. And also the other interesting thing that I just read, I think this morning, was that um, ear seeds, these acupuncture ear seeds, are not meant to be applied yourself. So
yeah,
it shouldn't be a case that you kind of like just order these things off the internet and they turn up and you stick them on your ears, because they're not
right.
going to necessarily be in the right places, and actually they should be applied by a trained acupuncturist.
Yes.
So the whole business model is dodgy. There was a news article as well this morning that came, well, yesterday, I'll just read. The pro science group, the Good Thinking Society, wrote to the Advertising Standards Authority to complain about misleading claims on the Accuseeds website. And Michael Marshall from the group got an email from the Advertising Standards Agency this week saying that there was likely to be a clear problem under the rules. He says it raises questions about the BBC's due diligence in allowing Accuseeds on the show. So yeah, I think this will rumble on for a while yet in terms of the response from the BBC, the which was wholly inadequate. I got an email back from my complaint in the last couple of days and shared that on Twitter, and that got shared quite a bit because the BBC were again just distancing themselves from it. There was no empathy. There was no sense of we got this wrong. They literally sort of like took the episode off the streaming platform for like a day or maybe
They put
2
it
days
back on the
max.
platform?
Yeah, with a tiny little statement that you can hardly read
No.
in white writing, just basically as a disclaimer saying that ackee seeds are not meant to cure any condition, which is directly opposite to what is being portrayed by the individual and the dragons themselves, who all seem to be endorsing it. So the BBC saying we're not endorsing this, and then actually what you're seeing is very different from what they're stating. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
the whole thing's a mess, and it will continue. But I'll certainly be complaining about my complaint as well, which I need to do as well, and I'll put links into the description for the Canary site, which Steve Topple has put together a brilliant kind of template in terms of how to complain about the complaint process with the BBC if you've watched it. So yeah, there's that's going to rumble on, but it does just feel it feels heavy, doesn't it? I think it feels like we're sort of carrying this burden of having to try and justify ourselves as a community,
yeah,
and
and to
that's not
hold
being
all
heard.
that
So
while holding the
yeah,
grief of, like,
yeah,
seeing people die and end their lives, and, yeah, it's just kind of a wild, um my brain wanted to say frisson of events. I don't know if that even what that even
mm,
quite means, but,
mm,
it's, I think and anything that sort of encourages people socially to sort of make light of an illness. I think there's like a sense of injustice that we just kind of have to try to tolerate because we a lot of us don't have access to ways of sort of managing stress or letting go of stress. Dan, remember when you were talking about the scream? Were we already recording then
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay. Like Dan's scream that he can offer you. But you know, it's like we can't all do a scream, and we can't all like many of us or most of us don't have access to ways of really dealing with stress. Like we really just have to work so hard to not sort of be harmed by the stress that it causes when something very public like this leads to it's like we have to deal with this so much already. I keep and it's funny because Dan and I were going to talk about illiversaries today, and I think we're not going to get to that.
Yeah, no.
I will just say that I'm getting to be around 10 years. I had my 10-year flu anniversary on New Year's Eve on the Gregorian New
Mm,
Year, and I'm moving in the direction of my 10-year anniversary of being homebound. And I this is something I've brought up in another episode, but that I struggle with being social with people who don't have ME, who have sort of alternative beliefs where they think you can cure ME by like quote curing trauma and by quote becoming emotionally unstuck and by there's
mm,
all these like I would call them hokey ideas. I know that that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but like um the feeling of like where I reach my limit, where I just feel like, okay, this is somebody else's beliefs. and but I cannot be around someone who has those
Mm.
beliefs because um, it sort of it does affect me, and I would love to hear other people's thoughts on like how they navigate. It's like it's very hard have to avoid being in contact or having relationships with people who sort of hold beliefs that like it's kind of your fault if you're not getting better because you're not doing quote
Mm.
the work or whatever, and I kind of sometimes reach a limit where I just find it intolerable and can't be around it. And I think I've reached that space with a friend recently, or somebody who was a friend, and I feel like stuff like this with that happened on BBC, like there are so many layers and levels in which it is wrong and unethical and horrifying and absolutely astonishingly irresponsible. But it's also going to cause a cascade of sort of people coming at people with ME with this idea that there are easy fixes and easy
Mm.
cures, and like
Mm.
how are we supposed to sort of socially exist in a world where those beliefs are so prevalent,
Mm.
and Matthias kind of talked about, or was it Judith? I think it was Judith who sort of talked about, I think she talked about sort of her empathy for people who struggle to um, really sit with and hold like how devastating an illness like this is and how it's possible for it to happen to anyone. But it's scary. People want to feel like they can control whether or not they get sick. I think a lot of people want to
Mm.
believe that if they got long COVID or ME, they would be okay because they would do the right things. And so, I guess
Mm.
it's like I really want to hold compassion for the fear people have and for the fact that we live in a culture that behaves like the BBC behaves, and wants to
Mm.
wants to um wants to sell a story of miraculous recovery
Mm.
at the expense of millions of people's quality of life who are
Mm.
already um devastatingly sick. Um
Mm.
but yeah, I think it's like there's some kind of dissonance for me of, or some kind of real struggle of trying to sort of be a part of a world where those kinds of belief systems are prevalent and also constantly being um, held up by, like this kind of irresponsible behavior that the BBC did. Um,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was something I talked about in the last episode with Emily, which should be out now when you listening to when watching this. It's going out Friday the 2nd of February, and we talked about that element of grief and people like questioning why people uh lose friendships, like relation. Just coming to the end of the grief series that we've done, the universal issue that everybody's spoken about has been the loss of relationships, and why it is that that people in particular distance themselves from people with chronic illness, and it's a really hard question to answer because there's no research out there. There's no, in terms of loss and grief with chronic illness. It would be great if somebody did some research. But but yeah, like you were just saying, we talked about that in terms of the fears for your own mortality, but also this inherent belief that it won't happen to me or it can't happen to me, and actually facing up to people and maintaining relationships with people with chronic illness is, we haven't changed as people, as individuals we haven't changed, but what is it then that's kind of like people distance themselves? Life is busy for people, that's true, but it there's questions about empathy and questions about what is it that people then question because of societal uh, sort of brainwashing, is that the right word, about ME and chronic illness? There's people are questioning people's illness, or the amount of tweets that I see where people's own family members, parents, are that are saying to them, you just need to pick yourself up, and your identity has become your illness, and it's like, well, yeah, because this is what I'm having to live with, and a lack of empathy somehow, and which is pervasive across society, and it's really sad, and it's something that we have to kind of like manage and deal with. But if you haven't watched that episode with Emily, I'd really suggest it, because she brought some really fascinating insights, and talked about collective grief, and grief monitoring, and well, I'm losing my words now, but yeah, kind of almost as a community, like coming together, and acknowledging kind of like that this is really hard, and that there aren't any
Yeah,
easy answers. So
yeah.
yeah,
Can
that leads us on to sorry, do you want to say something else?
yeah, I do. There's a YouTube person called Science Girl or Physics Girl,
Mm,
Diane, I'm forgetting her last name, but she got long COVID and then she got ME, and she's been profoundly sick. I think she's now at a place where she can maybe talk and sit up a little, but she would I would say she was um had, in a severe ME situation,
mm,
and because she has like millions of social media followers, people were very upset that she was sick, but there was this sort of it was really fascinating looking at the comments and seeing a lot of people just being like, "Get well soon, hope you get better." Like
mm,
very few people saying like, "I understand that you're unlikely to have a full recovery, but I hope you're doing as well as can be." And then there were people who were just like, "I can't tolerate this. This is too depressing." Like people were literally
mm,
like, "This is too depressing. I'm out of here. I'm not going to follow this." As if it's like a story. I think people, when you say like people are being brainwashed, I think that is part of it, but it's also like we live in a culture that thrives on narratives of people getting sick and fighting it and getting
yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah,
And there's I think people want a particular end of the story,
mm,
and people want that in real life. It's like kind of wild. It's like people are literally like, I don't like this story because it's not ending the way that I want it to.
mm,
And so I'm not going to keep reading this story as if it's not a real human having a real life. And I will just say one other thing, which is that there's another very well-known science podcaster or YouTuber who was giving updates. He was doing updates on
yeah, I saw
her,
that.
and I found it so enraging because he literally was like, he's a science dude, and he's like, she has POTS, ME, MCAS, whatever the fuck that is. Like, literally was just like, I don't care what those things are. I'm just going to give you an update, and those things don't matter. And it's like, you would imagine somebody who's like claims that they're a science person would just explain what her illness
Oh, it must
is
have been a
and what
different
her
one than I saw. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
didn't see that one.
um and again, he has millions of followers, he's posting on her behalf, and can't even be bothered to like try to understand what her illness is. And so like even this person who's apparently like her close friend and her close ally is literally just like, whatever the fuck that shit is, I don't know, what does it matter? Like, let's move on. And so I'm just thinking about um how much I've learned from sort of seeing public discourse happening around her illness.
Mm,
And yeah, I think that there are cultural narratives that if we go outside of them, we become sort of unwanted culturally in a cultural way. And there's I'll just quick say this and then we can move on. There's a book I'm reading, which I haven't finished it. There's things I love about it and things that I find frustrating about it, but it's called Animal Joy, and she talks a lot about this, a lot about how like um, if you walk outside of the story that people want to kind of culturally tell about you, you often become um, sort of an outcast. And I think
Mm.
Dan's absolutely, I think you're absolutely right that we need to do research into the phenomena of people with chronic illness losing, and with ME losing friends. But um, I think that we can already, I think there's a way that we're not following the expected social script of like either getting better or
Mm.
dying. And we are trying to fight for our right to exist. And a lot of people don't like that. They don't like sort of people speaking up about their frustrations. And I think there's, and then it's like we can't engage with people in expected ways. Like when I was first sick, a lot of people were like, call me when you're better, call me when you can
Mm.
go out to dinner or go to a cafe, like just not interested in sort of shifting the way socializing happens, which we see a lot
Mm.
too with like COVID. Like people don't even want to wear a mask. It's like there's so little people are willing to sort of change in order to socialize differently for the sake of people's well-being and health. So,
Mm.
anyways,
Yeah. No, there's so much to unpack, isn't there? Um, yeah. Just a note that there's a pre-inquest hearing and another pre-inquest hearing for Maeve Boothby O'Neill.
yeah,
People might remember in the summer I did we did 2 episodes actually with Sarah, Maeve's mum, to talk about Maeve's writing, and the actual inquest is possibly going to be like over 2 weeks in the summer, June July time, but there is another pre-inquest hearing which I've requested a link for to be part of to watch the hearing tomorrow.
great.
So yeah, it's just for people to be mindful and like supportive of Sarah Boothby is on Twitter. And yeah, it's again another really difficult situation where um, the everybody seems to be sort of trying to distance themselves from any sort of responsibility for Maeve's death. And there are terrible kind of failings, and they seem to be trying to kind of like diminish those or keep the failings to Maeve's case and not look at the systemic issues. So what's hoped is that there'll be um, a wider kind of inquiry coming out of this in terms of the lack of provision, lack of
Yeah,
guidelines, lack of any sort of narrative for people with severe ME in the UK, and treatment of people with very severe ME in hospitals. The NICE guidelines, the updated 2021 NICE guidelines don't go far enough. Sarah's kind of like been really, she's been really passionate in terms of supporting or wanting to support the ME community as well,
yeah,
through her loss and what she's going through. So yeah, if people are listening, it'd be great to continue to support Sarah in that. So yeah. One other thing to let you know about, yeah, as our grief series has come to an end, um, it's been a brilliant time, but I've been asked to go on somebody else's podcast. A friend of mine, Lisa, has got a podcast called Because We Love, Finding Meaning After Loss, and it's about grief generally. Obviously, a lot of her podcast episodes focus on kind of people that have lost loved ones, but she was really keen to kind of widen it out. So it'll be great to have a voice about ME and grief outside of our little bubble. So yeah,
yeah,
I'll post that once it's happened and once it's out as well. So I'll be sort of talking about what ME is, how it impacts us, and the grief of chronic illness, and also kind of what we've learned through our grief series, and that'll hopefully be really good. Some a good episode that I'm talking to Lisa next week, and then that'll come out at some point after that. So yeah.
yay.
Um, yeah, I don't know if we've got anything else to cover. I think we'll have a maybe a good discussion maybe about anniversaries and things like that another time. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
there
was.
was I think it makes sense today to talk about sort of, um, current things that are going on that I think are all very connected.
Mm,
The and, sort of the injustices and the frustration with systems and, um, our deep desire to have um, some recognition and acknowledgement and some work being done, um, to shift situations that are, right now just, um, making a hard situation a
mm,
lot more a lot worse than it has to be, and just creating sort of injustice within the medical system, within hospital systems, within sort of cultural systems. I'm just trying to kind of bring together all this stuff we were talking about,
mm,
I think, uh, what it's like living in a world where we're just not being recognized, acknowledged, and supported in any meaningful ways right now, and we deserve to be. And so I guess on that note, I'm really excited for Dan's podcast that he's doing with, you said, with Lisa.
hmm
And then, yeah, please do check out, think about going to the inquest if you're up to it. And we really hope that, um, there's some accountability and change
mm,
that happens. But I think, it's hard to be without spoons and with so much to fight for and fight against. So yeah, just wishing everybody, um, as my friend Rachel says, some gentleness in your day, and just as hoping that people are managing as well as can be. And it makes sense to be like, hurting and frustrated on top of sort of, just dealing with the physical, aspects of ME, having to deal with, so much rough stuff happening.
mm,
But I'm really grateful that we have our ME community and all the ways we support each other, and, we do our best to um, to try to make some changes and to be there and to hold each other in the grief and the loss.
mm, mm. So yeah, do share, like, comment, all that sort of stuff. We've got
Yeah,
some really good episodes coming up. I've got sort of like semi-planned. I've kind of speaking to 3 authors in the next few weeks, hopefully, on very different topics. But yeah, so I'm doing some reading at the minute, or trying to. So very different topics. One fiction, two non-fiction, one related not to ME or pacing, and another one that's about something completely different and interesting. I think hopefully people will enjoy. So we'll keep you updated on that, and we'll see you next time.
ciao.
Bye.